Not every rooftop spike is what you think. For decades, city skyline bristled with metal rods and cables, not just to deflect lightning, but to draw power from the sky itself. While the world remembers Benjamin Franklin, almost no one knows that 19th century engineers wired entire buildings to capture the atmosphere's invisible electric field, chasing free volts when dynamos cost a fortune. If you've ever wondered why some old spires and domes are laced with networks far more elaborate than fire protection requires, this story might change how you see the city above you, because the biggest secret isn't what they tried, but what they actually built. In the middle of the 19th century, electricity was not something you could take for granted. Most homes and public buildings had no power at all. Outside the centers of major cities, electrical grids were rare, covering less than 10% of the population before the 1890 IEs. If a building wanted electric lighting or to power instruments, it needed its own generator, a steam-driven dynamo that could cost anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, a staggering investment at the time. That price didn't even include the ongoing costs for coal, maintenance, or the skilled staff to keep it running. For many institutions, especially those that needed only a small amount of power for lighting or scientific equipment, the economics just didn't add up. Engineers and scientists began to look upward for an answer. Long before the modern grid, they knew the air itself held a measurable electric field. Between the ground and the sky, a steady voltage gradient exists, typically about 100 to 150 volts per meter in fair weather. That means at just 10 meters above the ground, the potential difference can reach over 1,000 volts. The numbers were real and could be measured with the right instruments. The challenge was always the same. Voltage was abundant, but the current, the flow of usable energy, was elusive. Still, in an era where every watt could make a difference, the idea of tapping the atmosphere's natural electric field wasn't a fantasy. It was a practical question, driven by hard economics and the promise of harnessing a resource that, at least on paper, was everywhere above their heads. A single rod on a rooftop might look ordinary, but the real clues show up when you start to notice patterns that don't fit the standard recipe for lightning protection. True atmospheric collectors almost always feature more than one rod, sometimes entire lattices of copper or iron, arranged to maximize the surface area exposed to the sky. Instead of a lone vertical spike, you will see horizontal grids or webs, often stretching across the highest points of a roof. These structures aren't just for show. By spreading out and connecting multiple rods, engineers could boost the capacitance of the system by up to 4 times, capturing more of the ambient voltage difference between earth and air. The next piece of the puzzle is how these arrays connect to the rest of the building. Look for thick, insulated copper cables, sometimes as much as 3 centimeters across, snaking down from the roof and vanishing into the building's core. Unlike the thin wires of a simple lightning rod, these heavy conductors were built to carry even the faintest trickle of current safely to storage components deep inside, often in cellars or vaults. Insulation was crucial, not just for safety, but to prevent leakage along the route, since every microamp mattered. Collectors designed for atmospheric electricity often feature porcelain or glass insulators at every connection point, another sign that the goal was more than just shunting lightning strikes. Sometimes, the basement would house racks of Leyden jars or other capacitors, waiting to be charged by the slow, steady flow from above. These details, multi-rod grids, thick insulated cables, and dedicated storage, form a checklist for anyone hoping to spot a true atmospheric collector hidden in plain sight. Archival records and old photographs reveal 3 buildings where rooftop hardware tells a story that goes far beyond simple lightning safety. In Leipzig, the St. Nicholas Church, rebuilt in the 1840s, featured a lattice of 5 copper rods running along the spire and roofline. Local scientific society journals from that era mention electrical experiments conducted on site, and city archives record the installation of thick copper cables leading from the rooftop all the way down to the basement. Pre-war photos show a web of metalwork more elaborate than any standard lightning rod setup, hinting at a dual purpose, not just protection, but active collection. Vienna City Hall, completed in the 1880s, stands out for its metal domes and a conductor grid that links the highest points of the building. Preserved architectural plans label these networks as part of an atmospheric capture system, and municipal maintenance logs from the 1890s mention regular replacement of storage elements and insulation checks, details that only make sense if the system was meant to channel and store more than just the occasional lightning strike. The records even reference emergency lighting circuits tied directly to this rooftop array. At Cincinnati Observatory, overhead cables and poles encircle the dome, documented in both period photographs and observatory publications. Nightly logs from the 1878 describe voltage readings and experiments measuring the flow of current from the air. The scale and complexity of the setup, multiple insulated conductors, basement storage racks, go well beyond what would be needed for storm protection alone. Local archivists have helped preserve these records, providing a rare window into how atmospheric electricity was treated as a genuine engineering resource. Patent records from the late 19th century leave little doubt that the idea of pulling electricity from the air was treated as serious engineering. Cromwell Fleetwood Varley, a pioneer in telegraphy, filed a British patent in the 1860s describing a wire hoisted by a balloon, sometimes 30 meters above the ground, linked by glass insulators to a bank of capacitors. His notes mention measurable currents, typically around half a microampere in clear weather, stored for later use. French engineer Vion's 1868 patent laid out a grid of copper conductors on rooftops, each wire spaced a few meters apart, all routed to laid-in jars in the basement. The drawings spell out dimensions, materials, and even the placement of porcelain insulators, aiming to capture enough charge to power emergency lamps through the night. German inventors Moser and Streicher, in their 1881 patent, specified a 20-meter tower topped with a spherical copper electrode and deep iron grounding rods. Their system included a switchboard for cycling between 6 or more capacitors, a design focused on storing whatever current the weather would allow. In America, Nathan Stubblefield described elevated copper plates paired with buried zinc electrodes, using the earth-air voltage difference to charge batteries. His patent stressed real-world constraints. Outputs depended on height, humidity, and careful insulation. Peer-reviewed journals from the era back up these blueprints. Lord Kelvin's 1860 publication in Philosophical Magazine documents voltage gradients and methods for capturing them. Augustus Waller, in 1882, reported rooftop collector currents that varied with weather but were always small, measured in microamps. Elias Loomis, using kite-borne wires in the 1870s, demonstrated galvanometer deflections that proved the effect was real. These receipts, patents, diagrams, and journal records show a community of engineers and scientists documenting every step, treating atmospheric electricity as a resource to be measured, stored, and, at least in small ways, used. Deep in the cellars of 19th century observatories and city halls, racks of Leyden jars and glass capacitors waited for their slow charge from the sky. A typical bank might hold 10 microfarads, enough in theory to light a 10-watt lamp for a few minutes if fully charged to 1,000 volts. But the reality was less generous. With current densities in fair weather rarely exceeding 2 picoamps per square meter, even the most ambitious collectors could muster only a faint trickle. Charging a capacitor bank might take hours, and the stored energy could be spent in seconds. Emergency lighting circuits, when tested, often flickered out long before they could be called reliable backup. The numbers tell the story. A 10 microfarad jar at 1,000 volts stores just 5 joules of energy. That is barely enough to keep a small lamp glowing for half a minute. Attempts to scale up, adding more jars, raising the collectors higher, ran into the hard ceiling of physics. Air is an excellent insulator. The voltage gradient is real, but the current is stubbornly small. Modern measurements confirm what the old journals hinted. Even with improved materials, the output hovers in the microwatt to milliwatt range, not the kilowatts that would power a building. As municipal grids spread and the cost per watt of dynamo power dropped, the economics became impossible to ignore. Atmospheric systems were cheap to install, but unreliable and tiny in output. The dream faded, leaving behind only rumors and the occasional myth. Stories of Nikola Tesla or Thomas Henry Moray tapping boundless energy from the air still circulate, but the original patents and lab notes tell a different story. Tesla's own writings focus on transmission, not collection. Moray's demonstrations never revealed enough detail to be taken seriously by engineers. The real legacy of atmospheric electricity is not a suppressed technology, but a lesson in the limits of nature, and in the importance of reading the fine print on every legend. Today, atmospheric electricity still hums overhead, measurable but stubbornly elusive as practical power. As we chase new energy solutions, history reminds us, Nature's subtle forces don't always yield to invention. Sometimes the real lesson is in what can't be scaled. What forgotten potential might we overlook next? Share your thoughts below.